Hey, this is Dan from Bible Prophecy and Truth, and I'm starting a video series on understanding Revelation and the timeline of events in biblical prophecy. If you've come to this or discovered this video because you want to study the book of Revelation deeply and understand it completely, then you're in the right place. If you want to get a kind of a quicker view on biblical prophecy and get some ideas on what's going on a little faster, there's some other videos you can watch. If you go on my website at BibleProphecyandTruth.com, I have a video player that has a number of videos, and I highly recommend watching Prophecy Explained, which is this one here. It's the second one on the list, and there's two. It's a two-part video, but it's really good and will go quickly through the prophecies of the Bible and help you understand them. Also, the big picture, the final mosaic, helps quite a bit in understanding. If you want to watch on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel, Prophecy and Truth. That's what the picture looks like. You can search for that, and it also has Prophecy Explained Parts 1 and Part 2 on there, as well as the big picture, the final mosaic. And like I said, I highly recommend watching those if you want to get a quick view of biblical prophecy. And if you're on a mobile, this is the computer player, and if you're on a mobile device, you'll have a view like this if you go to the videos on my website, and it just has a list of the videos instead of the player, which you can just play the videos one at a time. And the way you get there is by going to the resources link on my website, and then from there clicking on watch our videos or listen to audio, because I do have audio versions of most of the videos as well. But if you want a quick view on prophecy and a real quick, it's about 20 minutes each video for those videos, so it's fairly quick, and it'll give you a good understanding of what's going on in prophecy and what's going on in the world right now, today. But if you did come here looking to understand the book of Revelation, then you're definitely in the right place. This is going to be a long series. It's probably going to be quite a number of videos, because I'm going to try to break them up into segments of about 15 to 20, 25 minutes. And I'm going to go through the book of Revelation verse by verse, and then also go to the other parts of the Bible that talk about the same things and the time frames and the events that are happening in Revelation, and go and we're going to look at Daniel, we're going to look at Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, Joel, a number of other places. And I'm going to ask you a question that I always ask people. I teach this class basically from my home or on Skype, and people in my area, and when I teach this in person, I always ask the people that come to the class, have you ever read the book of Revelation? Because I know that the first time you read it, it can be this, it seems like this crazy, mixed up book, right? But if you read it and do what I did and just read it, I read it about, I don't know how many times I read it. I read it, between 10 and 20 times, just over and over and over and over, until I started getting it in my head, and things started clicking. And then I started really studying it and really digging in, and that's what we're going to do. Is we're going to go verse by verse, and we're going to study it in great detail. And I'm going to start today by talking about how to read the book of Revelation, because it's really important to understand. I know that the mainstream teaching out there, they teach that in order to understand Revelation, you've got to read it from start to finish. It's all a series of chronological events that all happen after each other. But when we read Revelation, if you do like I did and you read it over and over and get it in your head, you'll realize, like I did, that it's not a chronological record of events. It's actually a series of visions that John was shown that all end at the same place, but they're just recorded. You know, you record one and then you record another one, you record another one, right? If you're writing things down. Uh, they're not necessarily done in that order. They are all, in fact, most of them are happening at the same time. And then there's a series of events that all happen right at the end. And so we have to understand how to read the book of Revelation, first of all. And if you want to follow along, you can go to my website, go to BibleProphecyandTruth.com. And you don't have to go to that full URL there. If you go to BibleProphecyandTruth.com and go to Bible Prophecy on the menu, and then go down to Understanding the Book of Revelation, that's where I'm at right now. And if you're on a web or on a mobile device, it'll look a little bit different than this. It'll have a menu at the top that has prophecy and biblical truth and creation versus evolution, and then you just click on prophecy, and then you'll have this same list, so you can go to Understanding the Book of Revelation. So if you want to follow on and you have a couple of screens on your computer or something, then please do. But I'm going to look at this page right now because I have a picture on here that shows us 5 scriptures in the book of Revelation that are 3 scriptures in the book of Revelation and 2 other scriptures. There's a lot of other scriptures that show the same time frames and show the same events. And Isaiah and Joel and other places, Zechariah, they all have the same time frames that they talk about. But these 5 scriptures really help us to get an idea of this final event, where these visions that John was shown all happen at different times, and they're happening sometimes, especially towards the end, they'll all be happening at the same time, and they all lead to that final event, which is when Jesus Christ returns and takes those that belong to him out of the world and then pours out his wrath on the earth. And the 6th seal, the 7th trumpet, the 7th vial, Matthew 24 and Ezekiel 38, and these 5 scriptures that I've got here, you can see that these events are all basically the same thing. Now, like in the seal, the sun becomes black. In Matthew 24, the sun is darkened. And we're gonna study these scriptures in more detail. But just right in the beginning, I wanted to give you an idea of how it's structured and how to read it, and so that you can understand right up front what we're going to be studying and how it's all going to come together once we've studied all of the different visions that are in this book. Because it's really important, in order to understand Revelation, it's really important that we understand how to read it. So this chart is a really good, just a visual representation of those scriptures. And I want to show you basically what we're looking at with that chart, because there's some things that we need to understand. It's all of these events, all of these things that are happening here, these statements that are made, you know, the sun and moon and stars go dark, the mountains and islands are moved, there's a great earthquake, the day of God's wrath has come, there's great hail. All of these things show us that each one of these passages is really talking about the same event. And the 6th seal, 7th trumpet, and 7th vial all come at the end of a series of other events that are parts of those visions. And like I said, they all happen at the same time, but they don't necessarily all start at the same place and then end at the same place. They start at a certain time. They're happening, like the seals are most likely have been happening for quite some time now. And then the trumpets, it's likely that they're already starting to blow. But the vials haven't even begun yet, and they won't begin until the very end. But then all of them towards the end are all happening at the same time, and they all end at the same place. And that's what I'm trying to help you to see just real quickly in the beginning, before we start really digging in to the study. It's important to understand how to read it. And I'm going to talk about a few other things where John kind of writes in a circular way, and he'll start a vision, then he describes another vision, and then he goes back to the same vision again, and he does that in a few places. And so it's one of the reasons that we really have to read Revelation over and over and over and over, and really get it in our heads so that we can begin to understand it. And there's a few things that we need to look at in addition to those 5 scriptures. It's like Babylon falls in Revelation 14:8, and then in Revelation 18:2, Babylon has fallen again. And so if it fell in chapter 14, did it get rebuilt, or is it really just 2 scriptures talking about the same event? Same thing with the earthquake. Is there 1 or is there 5, right? We have great darkness twice in Revelation 6 and Revelation 16. Same with great hail. And I encourage you to go to my website and study this yourself, and really read the scriptures and study the scriptures and study this chart, and really get your head wrapped around what all of these visions and events are. And then I have a list close to the top of the page where it shows what I was just talking about, how John kind of writes in kind of a circular way almost. He starts on one subject, and then he goes to another subject, another vision, and then goes back to it. And it's one of those things that I truly believe that God showed John these visions in the way that he did for the same reason that he taught in parables. And he taught in parables, as Jesus said, when the disciples asked him, why do you teach these things in parables? He said basically that it's because I don't want those that don't love me to understand. I want you to understand. And then he goes on to explain to the disciples what the parable meant. But he doesn't want those that don't love him to understand. And he wrote prophecy, he wrote the whole Bible in that same vein. So we need to, in order to understand it, we first of all have to love God. We have to love his truth, and we have to really seek it and ask the Holy Spirit for discernment and understanding of the scriptures. That's the only way to understand the Bible as a whole. We have to let the Bible interpret itself. If there's a hard to understand passage, we need to let the rest of the Bible explain what that passage means. And in order to do that, we have to read the whole Bible, right? We have to read it from cover to cover, and not even just one time. We need to continually read it and allow God to show us that truth. So there's a few 13 things that I have listed here. There's one specifically I want to talk about is number 7 here, where in the 7th trumpet, the 7th vial, Revelation 7, Revelation 21, and Ezekiel 38. They all kind of show us the same events. And don't worry, we're going to talk more about this. I'm going kind of fast in the beginning, but I want to give you just a snapshot. And then as we're studying Revelation, we're really going to dig into these scriptures, and we're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. But for example, in Revelation 21 and in Ezekiel 39, we have the statement, "It is done." Right? I mean, it's done. And then in Revelation 16, the 7th trumpet, Revelation 7, Revelation 15, we've got things that are talked about that are basically that same vein of everything is done. It's all finished and it's all over. But it's not, and that's what kind of shows us that Revelation is not a sequential timeline of events. You don't read Revelation from chapter 1 to the end and read it as if it's a sequence of chronological events. It is not, and it can't be understood if we try to read it that way. So that's why I'm starting off with this to kind of prepare you as you start reading. And like I tell people that I teach locally, as we're studying Revelation, read it for yourself over and over. And like I have weekly Bible studies that it takes about 8 weeks really to get through the whole book of Revelation. And I ask my students to read Revelation every week, all the way through. It really doesn't take that long, a half hour to an hour, depending on how fast you read. And once you start reading it over and over and over, things really start to click. So that would be what I would suggest that you do right off the bat. If you really want to understand Revelation, is to just start reading it and read it over and over. And then as we study it and get into it verse by verse in great detail, then it'll really start coming to life in your mind. So another thing that we need to understand is that the whole book of Revelation is not necessarily prophetic. There are prophetic parts of Revelation, and then there's parts of Revelation that are not prophetic. And we have an example of that in chapter 1, for example, is things that John saw. He actually saw Jesus Christ. And in chapters 2 and 3 are letters to the churches that existed in that day. And I'm going to show you here in Revelation 1. It actually says, when in Revelation 1:4 here, you see that John to the 7 churches which are in Asia. And that shows us explicitly that these letters that are written, and you'll see what I mean when we study chapters 2 and 3, that they're actually letters written specifically to existing churches at that time. So these parts are not prophetic. These are things that John saw and was happening at the time, and letters that he was given by Jesus to give to the churches. So the prophetic parts don't actually start until we get to chapter 4. But I'm not going to keep going on this video. I want to give a quick introduction and kind of set the expectation is that this is going to be a very long study. It's going to be quite a number of short segments as we go through the book of Revelation, and I'm going to go through it, like I said, verse by verse in great detail. So like I said, if you want to get a quicker view of prophecy and kind of get an idea of the big picture and everything that's going on in the world, then definitely go and watch those other videos either on my website or on YouTube. And I'm going to close this video out, but I look forward to talking with you in the next video. God bless.